Do you find yourself confused by the term safe area and how that compares to your sewing space or a quilting zone? Do you find yourself with a pink screen and an error message that says you're out of the safe zone? If that was you, and that was certainly me when I was a beginner, I'm going to go through the definition of each one of those terms. What is a safe area? What is a sewing zone? And how is that different than the quilting space or a row? Hopefully, by going through each one of those terms and explaining them, I'll be able to help you avoid getting that error message in the future. Or if you do get the error message, hopefully you'll be able to resolve it quickly and move on with your quilting project. Let's get started. Let's start by defining what the safe area is, since that's really the subject that we're trying to clarify here. So I'm going to go into Pantograph. Maybe. There we go. Yes, I'm going to set the safe area. So what is the safe area? The safe area really is the boundaries you identify for the computer system, indicating where it's safe to quilt or it's safe for the machine head to move around. So it's typically defined by, you can see here in this graphical representation, this top bar. This is what we call the take-up roller here. And that is the roller that takes up the quilt as you advance it after it's completed quilting. A section, a zone is completed quilting. It rolls up on this take-up roller. And then here at the bottom is called the belly bar. Some people take that off of their machines, depends on how you like to load your quilts. I still have mine on my machine, and that's the bottom border of your safe area. Then on the left and the right hand side, that is really determined by your side clamps. So you don't want your quilting head to run into your side clamps. So your safe area on the left and right hand side should be inside the physical place where your side clamps are attached to the fabric. And that really defines what your safe area is. Because you're telling your machine where it's okay to stitch, you want this area, this space, to be on fabric. So if for some reason your machine needed to quilt or did quilt all the way to the edge of the safe area, it's quilting on fabric. If you were to mark like the left and right hand sides outside of that space, there's a risk that the machine would move there and start quilting with nothing underneath it, and you don't want that. So this is why we require batting and backing to be several inches larger than the quilt top itself. Okay, so let's go in and set the safe area. We're going to set the safe area at 60 inches wide by let's say 20 inches high. Now the 20 inches is the space between the take-up roller and the belly bar. This is the maximum amount of space your machine can quilt, and it all depends on the size of your quilting machine. I have an APQS Millennium, and so I can get about 20 inches of quilting space. But if your machine throat space is smaller, that number is going to be smaller. Okay, a special note here before we get into the specifics, but I just want to make sure you understand that your safe area should never be the same size as your quilting space or your quilting zone. You want the safe area to be bigger. So let's talk about that for a minute. I have a little diagram here that I want to show you, and I'll demonstrate this on the computer screen here in a minute, but I want you to see that the safe area is defined on your screen by a red box. Sorry, it's gone out of focus. By the red box, and you can see that the green box is your quilting zone or your quiltable space. Those are the same things. You want the zone to be smaller than the safe area because you have to place it inside the safe area. So you can see that the bigger your safe area and the smaller your quiltable space, the smaller your quilt zone, the easier it's going to be for you to place one box inside the other. It doesn't mean you can't do it if they're close to the same size, but it becomes more complicated and you want to avoid that if possible. Okay, so let's go back to the screen here. We're gonna, first thing I want you to note is up here in the upper left-hand corner, it tells you what your safe area is, 60 by 20. If we look down here in our sizing, you can see that that's what's been loaded here in the numbers, 60 by 20. But that's not the size of our quilt. This needs to be the size of our quilt. So the first thing you do when you go into this screen is reset those numbers, or you're gonna have problems. So the first thing we're gonna do is set the width. We're gonna touch on that square. And we're gonna say our quilt is 50 inches wide. And then we're gonna go into total height, and we're gonna say it's 70 inches long. And you can see the screen graphically changes, and so this is a graphical representation of our quilt. Okay, so now we're gonna go in and select a pattern. I'm going into batch. I have some in batch. That means I've loaded them in there, but I haven't put them in a folder yet. You don't want to leave all your quilt patterns in your batch folder, but that's a subject for a different conversation. I'm going to go in and use this pattern called Popcorn. All right, so it's loaded. I'm in Power Panto, so it's doing all the math for me. I'm going to go up here and put the magnifying glass on and look, and I can see that some of my lines are crossing each other, and I don't want that. So I need to put in some vertical spacing, and I know, because I use this pattern a lot, that about 4 is a pretty good representation. It looks real even on the screen, and so we've got it all set up now. So I'm gonna go back out now, and we're back in the Panto Stacker screen. Okay, so now the next thing I do is I want to save now that I've got it set up the way I want to save my pattern. And to do that, you go up here and you hit this Save Panto Design button up here. I'm not going to do it right now. This is just a demonstration, so for demonstration purposes, I'm not going to save it. But you definitely want to save this step before you move on. So let's say we've done that. Now I'm going to go into Sew in Zones, and I'm going to tap on this, and it's going to divide that quilt into sewing zones for me. And then it's going to say, do you want to save your sewing zone session? Well, yes, I do. Again, if you have any kind of unplanned interruption or even a planned interruption, say I quilt part of the quilt today and I want to finish it tomorrow, you need to have this sewing zone saved. And it's not the same as saving your pattern. So those are two different saves, and you need to do both of them. So for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm not going to save it, but if I was working on a quilt, I absolutely always save the sewing zone. All right, now we go into quilt in zones. And so here it's saying this is your first zone. And so let's see if are you ready to place the zone? So let's talk about a zone. A zone is the sewing space. So I'm gonna, for demonstration purposes, I have to tell it where the needle of the machine is. So I'm going to place it right there, and then, so let's just say that's where I moved my machine to, and that's where my center of my quilt is. I'm gonna touch that to place the pattern. Okay, by golly, I got the pink screen. This is what we want to avoid, right? So remember when I showed you what the screen would look like with the green box and the red box? Let's examine what we're dealing with here. So you can see the red box and you can see the green box. Well, this side, the top, and this side are all inside the red box. But down across the bottom, if you go in closely, you can see the green line is underneath the red line. That means I'm out of the safe area, which is exactly what this error message says. So that means I need to move my quilt just a hair that direction. So this needle point right here indicates that should be a piece of tape or a marked spot on your quilt, and it's down this way too far. So you've got to physically move the quilt back just a hair this way. And so let's do that. Let's pretend we've done that. So I'm going to say, okay, now my needle space is there, and let's place it. And by golly, it's no longer outside of the safe area. Okay, so let's talk about zones. A zone is your quilting space, but it's not the same as a row. A row of your quilting can be the same as your quilting zone, or you can have multiple rows of your pattern inside of a zone, which is the case here. I think this is 3 passes of the quilt, of the pattern on your quilt. So that's what a quilting zone is. So let's talk about why I would want more than one pass or row of a pattern in a quilting zone. As a business owner, efficiency is important to me, right? I'm getting paid really essentially by the hour. So the more efficient I can be with my time, the better off I am as a business owner. So I'm going to want to optimize how many times I advance the quilt. Advancing a quilt takes time. You have to advance the quilt, secure the sides of the quilt, you know, there's a lot of steps that you have to do when you advance a quilt. And so it takes extra time. So by optimizing how many passes of the pattern I can put in one quilt zone, I'm being more efficient with my time. Now, if you don't own a business and you're not doing long arming for business, perhaps this doesn't mean anything to you. It doesn't matter to you. But just think about it from an efficiency perspective. So I just want to point out a couple things here. Like I said, I've got 3 passes of the quilt pattern. I've got a little bit of space here between the bottom of the quilt zone and the safe area, and a little bit of space at the top. The more you try to optimize the quilting space, your throat space, that 20 inches of your safe area, the more it's going to be difficult for you to place the pattern. So just keep that in mind. There are ways you can adjust that. You can maybe adjust the size of the quilting pattern if it still looks pleasing to fit in more passes, or you can, in this case, maybe if my pattern were bigger, maybe I'd want just 2 passes of the pattern instead of 3. But all things to consider as you're planning out your quilting. Okay, finally, I want to go into Zone Manager and show you a few things in Zone Manager. It's just telling you that if you go into Zone Manager, your placement is going to be adjusted when it's going to be back to needing to be placed when you come back in. Usually not a problem. So yes, I want to open up Zone Manager. Okay, so this is the screen where it shows you how many zones you have. You can move through the zones by pressing on these arrow buttons. You can see it goes down to zone 2, 3, 4, and a little small zone 5. So if you need to move your zones for some reason, this is the screen you would do it in. We want to go back up to zone 1. I really want to focus specifically on this box right here, this zone scale percent. It took me a long time to understand what this means. So the zone size is 60 by 19. This is a modified safe area. So our safe area was 60 by 20. So you can see the width is the same, but the height is different. So what this is this is just a secondary safety number, if you will, to help you manage the distance between those 2 rollers. This is specifically there because as you quilt the quilt and you advance the quilt, the amount of quiltable space decreases as the thickness of that quilt grows on that take-up roller. And so this is just an extra safety valve, if you will, to help you manage that so you don't get to a point where you can't place your design because your safe area is too small and your quiltable space is bigger than your safe area. And so what it does is it takes this percentage, and you can modify this percentage, but 95 is usually a pretty good number, and it reduces the width of your safe area. So let's look at that calculation. I've done that calculation here. My original safe area was 20. The zone scale percent is 95, and if you multiply 20 by 0.95, 0.95 is a decimal representation of 95%. It's going to give you 19. Well, if we look here, guess what? That's what that number is. So if you get in a really tight space when you're placing your quilt on the lower rows and you might need a little more space, you can actually come in here and increase this number. And so it's making this number larger to give yourself a little bit more wiggle room. That might make more sense as you go along and you become more experienced. I also hope to have a video that I post that gives you an actual practical application of some of these definitions, and so you can watch for that. But I hope that walking through all these definitions has made the safe area more understandable to you, and so I hope that this makes your quilting process smoother as you go along. Okay, that really concludes the information that I wanted to review with you today. I want to encourage you to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel Nifty Stitches by Nan. So you'll be notified when I post new videos. My emphasis early on in my YouTube channel is going to be these videos about the Quilt Path computerized long arming system, but eventually I do hope to expand into some more general long arming videos as well as general quilting and piecing videos. So stay tuned for more of that.